Hi there, it's Ardyth here, and I'm excited to be back here on the Splitcoaststampers channel with a really simple but absolutely stunning project. To make this elegant birthday card, you'll need 4 pieces of 3 3/4 inch square paper. This needs to be quite thin because of all the folding. I used origami paper, but this would be really pretty with pattern paper or even shimmery vellum. A scoreboard and a bone folder, liquid glue, embossing ink and embossing powder. This is optional. I used gold sparkle. A 5.5 inch square card base. Other items to finish your card. To start, I recommend doing a practice run before you try it with your good paper. This is a piece of printer paper that was cut to a 4-inch square. You definitely need some thin, pliable paper. Cardstock will not work for this one. Pattern paper is a great option. Next, cut the square in half diagonally. You don't need to measure anything, just line it up corner to corner on your trimmer and you'll have 2 triangles which will make 2 petals. Now it's time for the scoreboard. Line the long edge of the triangle up along the edge of the scoreboard and score a line at 1/4 inch. I found it best to start the scoring away from the top edge of the triangle because my bone folder was catching on the edge and creasing the paper, but you'll get into your own rhythm. Because you'll be folding it back and forth, I found it easier to flip the triangle over and score on the other side of the paper for the next fold, and then continue to alternate and score on every 1/4 inch all along the triangle until you've gone right to the tip of the triangle. Next, starting with the tip, fold along the score lines back and forth like a simple fan. Try to put the edge of the piece you're folding along the next visible score line. This will help you keep it straight, but if it isn't perfect, don't worry. This technique is quite forgiving. As I said, I found it easier because I had scored the alternating lines on the front then the back, and it folds up pretty quickly. Once you've got it all folded into a long line, give it a good burnish, either with your fingers or with your bone folder. Just not so much pressure that you rip the paper. Remember, this isn't as robust as cardstock. The next step is to add glue all along that long line. This is on the side that isn't showing any folds. I used my tape runner, but liquid glue would work as well, and you may even prefer hot glue. Now you fold the paper in half, and you get those 2 pointy ends to line up together. And once they're lined up, you press down along the 2 outside edges to get a crisp fold right down the center. And you can burnish it again to make sure everything's really folded well and that the glue is holding. Then you fan out the sides and you get this pretty flower petal, or a leaf. I like to trim the very pointy end off the top, but you don't have to if you like the look of it. Okay, now we're playing for keeps, and I've got 4 pieces of origami paper that I've trimmed down to 3.75 inches. I found the 4-inch one to be quite big, and it would require a 6-inch card, but it's good to know that this technique works with any size, depending on how you want to use the petals that you make. I cut all 4 in half at once with my trimmer, and now I have enough to make 8 petals. This paper is quite a bit more delicate, and I had to be very careful with my bone folder not to poke right through it. That's the first lesson I learned when I was doing it for real. The next one was that when I started with my first score line on the pretty side of the paper, the center of the petal ended up being the 2 raw edges of the paper rather than folded edges. So for the rest of the petals, I started on the back. If you use double-sided paper, this wouldn't be an issue. And honestly, I think it's one of those little things that probably most people wouldn't notice at all, especially once I got to the next step. Because of the different size of these triangles, the score line at the tip of the triangle was less than 1/4 inch from the edge. So I trimmed that off rather than trying to fold that tiny little piece into the petal. I used 2 different patterns of origami paper that had matching colors, but of course you could use all different colors or all the same, whatever you prefer. To add to the elegance of my petals, I dipped each of them into some embossing ink, just pressing them down lightly so that only the folded edges got ink on them. Then I dipped each one into some gold sparkle embossing powder and I shook off the excess. But it's such a relief. You don't have to worry if you get powder in the wrong places because any extra sparkle will be very pretty. Once all 8 of my petals were ready, it was time to glue them together. I ran some liquid glue along one edge of a petal and then I held it in place to the next one. I did 4 together and then the other 4 together, alternating the patterns of the paper and holding them together in my fingers while the glue dried a bit. I found that the hardest bit was then gluing the two sets of the 4 petals together because I couldn't close them up and really squeeze them together in the same way, now that they were completing a circle. But a little patience got me there in the end, and hot glue might be a better option. I wanted to add a bit of color behind my flower on my card, so I cut a big circle from white cardstock, and I put down some dye inks onto my gel press, and I added color that way. You could use colored cardstock or pattern paper, especially if you've used solid colors on your petals. And then to glue the flower to the die-cut circle, I used lots of liquid glue right around the center of the flower. Again, this might be another good place to substitute a hot glue gun, and I placed it onto the panel with an acrylic block until it dried. To finish the card, I added a die-cut sentiment cut from some Inca Gold cardstock, which has a mirror finish with an iridescent sheen, so you get lots of colors flashing back. I added a stamped birthday word sentiment and some iridescent gold gems as well. Now, this is not a card you're going to whip up quickly, although it's not difficult. And it's clearly not a card that can easily be mailed, but it's a wonderful option for a very special person on a very special occasion. I hope you enjoyed learning about it. Thanks so much for watching.